Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Bob Talk on Bob's Radio. My name is Rio Raymond and I'm in the company of a very beautiful person, Champa Saha. Thank you so much for joining us on this lovely day.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So-
I'm so thrilled and excited about this.
In fact, I'm very excited to know the kind of depths that you have in terms of knowledge in this particular subject of special education, since you're a special educator. And we're going to be talking about Autism Pride Day, because today is Autism Pride Day. And we thought it was fitting that, we bring in conversations about this particular subject that many are aware of, but aware of that there is something called autism. There are people with autism or a disorder. But the lens of it, what is the lifestyle of these kids or people with autism, and what are the kind of things that they go through, and how do people interact better with them? This is something that we would love to learn from you. And the whole purpose of us doing this, I always say this: we'll never have an ideal world, but something about what we could do right in certain ways that could just make the world a little better place. So for that, I want to thank you for coming to just make this effort a little more better for us.
Really appreciate this effort and initiative. See, there's no end to knowing, and especially when you want to know another person. So this is work in progress, and whatever little experience I have, because I'm an inclusive practices consultant, I've been working with children and families who are impacted with different kinds of diversities. So thank you so much for taking this initiative. It's really appreciated.
This comes across not just because it says Autism Pride Day, but also we see a lot of kids with the disorder and how we can work our way through. So to start off with, ma'am, what exactly is autism spectrum disorder? Because I know it's a neurological issue, but what exactly in its true sense is it?
Right, very important question and a very interesting question actually, because I don't think there is any one definition that fits, like a blanket. One thing that is a very personal take that I have on it is that I wish that we could now start a movement to rethink the word disorder.
Right.
Because of that word, it has such a connotation that it is automatically taken as something that needs to be cured, that needs to be healed, that needs to be treated. Whereas I see it as a different neurotype. It is a type, a diverse neurotype, and that is it. Of course, a person who belongs to that type, and that type is not just one, it's like an umbrella, right? It's a spectrum. So it can have millions of permutation combinations that create the unique profile or a personality of a person who we deem or we label as somebody on the spectrum. But it is less and less for me seen by me as a disorder, because what happens is it creates certain characteristics or personality traits or way the brain works. You could define it in very many different ways, whereby a person is unique in his or her way of processing the sensory inputs that come to the person. The expressive languages, that is either by speech or by gesture, the way we express ourselves overtly so that the world, gets to know what we are trying to convey. Either we use words or we use gestures. They may be different. Right? Because it is coming to them in a bit of a different way. And it is not the way that we are used to. So it's not easy for us to even fathom or understand. So what do? We take the easiest path and we call them special, or we call them, different, or whatever it is. There are 100 words that have come into it. But the crux of the matter is that there has been and there is a lot of injustice. There's a lot of putting together of dots that don't actually align. For example, if we have an autistic who is non-speaking, the automatic jumping to conclusion is that he doesn't understand, he doesn't know things, there's no point or no use in telling things or exposing that child or that individual to education or to concepts because, and probably I don't really blame the white world, because the way civilization has progressed, we have evolved testing systems that are all 100% based on expressive language. So we really haven't found a way of gauging the receptive levels of a person's knowledge, information, understanding. Science has proved long back, especially in the field of language, that there are two distinct levels of, the learning field of learning a language. And it begins with the receptive,
Right.
which is what the infant receives. In fact, science has also proved that it is the auditory sense that clicks on first, even when the child is in the womb, and it's the last one to go when a person is on the deathbed. So even as a child is in the womb, the auditory system has kicked in. And the child is getting to hear sounds and interpret them, know them. One of the earliest sounds the child hears is the beating of the mother's heart and the gargling of the bowel movement in the mother's body. And that is how you see babies when they are out in the world and they put on their mother's chest and all are easily soothed because they get the tuck, 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 tuck.
The heartbeat.
Yes, it's a familiar sound. So from then on, there are tones, things that the child has been hearing and hears later when the child is born and picks up language. So the receptive level has started much, much, much earlier than anything expressive. Expressive is the crying of a newborn.
Right.
Right. So the crying is a universal expressive vocal language for a newborn. If it's not feeling well, if it's hungry, if it is scared, if it's uncomfortable, if it
It's
just
the only way of
whatever,
communicating
the
is
child
crying.
cries, the baby cries. And gauging from the responses an infant gets when the infant cries, the infant starts joining the dots.
Right.
That, okay, I need to bawl my heart out and somebody's going to pick me up and give me things. So that's the beginning of expressive language, right? But it all begins with the receptive.
Right.
A toddler, has just started crawling and we say, no, in a loud voice, just stops in its tracks. How does the toddler know what that even means? Knows because the receptive level is already there. And now the expressive has begun. So for many people on the autism spectrum, there is what is popularly now being termed as the mind-body disconnect. Neurologically, it is a very, very complex state, and it is not a blanket for all autistics. But we could understand it a little bit by, an example like, suppose there's a child who's doing a reading program with a teacher and needs to get up and run around, and the teacher's got the book open and says, okay, come and sit down here. I've got your book, you come for reading. The child has understood exactly what the teacher's saying, and the child wants to go and sit there. Now, it is the child's neural system that takes over to command the muscles, right? To take that path,
Right.
to reach. Now the muscles just won't cooperate. So here you'll have a kid who kind of goes this way and that way, and the jumping to conclusion happens. He won't listen, he's not understanding, he's obstinate, he's moody.
So these are the
he's
spectrums you
fidgety.
say are varied. They are not construed like, okay, this is how one person is.
Absolutely
And
varied.
even the behavioral patterns are different for every one of them.
Absolutely.
But there is also one thing a lot of people would notice, when you have kids with autism, spectrum disorder, a lot of them look very similar in figure. Is this because of a certain way it is, or what is it exactly?
Again, I think it's just like all zebras look alike to us, right?
Right.
But zoologists tell us that that's not the case at all. So, no, they look similar maybe because of broad, hand flapping maybe, or stimming in the way of humming, loud vocal stimmings, making noises loudly, or looking around fidgety. So those are the broader images that the white society has in mind.
I like how you're putting it, the white society.
we all are part. We have these things in mind, and an autistic person always does this. So, but within each autistic person's manifested outward behaviors, there are differences. They are very unique to each individual. And what is very, very important to remember is that behavior is, three things primarily. Behavior is communication. Like, I want you to come closer to me. I could just
You could
gesture
do it
with
your
my
hand.
hand. And I need to convey to you for whatever reasons I'm not able to call out or whatever. So I am engaging in a behavior which I know will convey to you that I need you to come closer to me. So I wave with my hand because it's kind of become an universally accepted gesture, right? So behavior is communication. Behavior is also a response. It is response both to external stimuli, what is coming to us from the outer world, and what is within us. So I may be sitting somewhere all alone. I mean, there's nobody, nothing has happened to me, and I am reading a book or whatever, and I'm triggered by a memory of my father who I may be missing. I've lost my father years back, and a tear rolls down my eye, or I just start feeling very sad.
It's stimulation.
It is stimulated by my inner urges, my memories, recalling my father, the fact that he's not here anymore. Or I may have just stepped out of your studio and it starts pouring. So I'm going to duck, or I'm going to do something, or duck back inside, or run. So that is behavior that is going to be stimulated because of that external situation of the rain. So behavior is always a response. It is triggered by what is around us or what is within us. And the third thing that behavior is, it is a way of regulation.
Right.
Right? We use behaviors all the time to regulate ourselves. Now, the difference here is our prejudices. Behaviors that we have come to terms with as seen like very commonly, we don't give a second look to them. No, it's very, very common. I go outside and I see these, you have these seats in malls and all outside. I see so many people like blowing on them or dusting it with something. So it makes me laugh because I'm not very particular about if I'm sitting on a speck of dust or not. But there are people who do that. But nobody's looking at them. Nobody's turning around and all, because it's kind of become okay with the world around, the wide society, so to speak, to dust somewhere before you sit down on it. And now we may have a person on the spectrum who's entered a mall, let's say, and it's overwhelmingly stimulating. And now this person understands the need to regulate herself. So she will have a few unique ways that she has come up with on her own to regulate herself. And one of those ways could be singing loudly, just humming, making sounds. Now, since that is not part of the white society repertoire, everybody is going to turn around and say, hey, look at that funny girl, mad girl, or whatever. So that is what is happening to behavior. And because of this, you will see that over the last so many years, there was this urge to control behavior. We have so many therapies around behavior management.
Yeah.
Okay. But latest research is showing, and this is not only research, it's very important here that I say that autistic voices now, thankfully, are coming out very vocally with what they have undergone as children when they were taken to these multiple, management sessions. Again, it's not a blanket. It's not that all therapies are like black and they need not be done, speech, OT. It is unique to each individual's need. The problem that I have is that it's like a blanket. You have a child being evaluated by a medical practitioner as being on the spectrum. Immediately, there will be this rush to go to the OT, the occupational therapist, the speech therapist, and the behavior management. Definitely, there are hundreds and thousands of children who have benefited immeasurably through these timely measures and interventions that have happened through very specific, interventions, but not necessarily all. Not necessarily that it was required by all. So this whole, while on the one hand, the name itself calls it a syndrome, okay, which is like this massive blue umbrella under which so many millions of combinations can fall. On the other hand, the moment it is ASD, there is this, checklist of things that you're supposed to do with the children. It's self-defeatist.
Right.
The first thing that the practitioner and the parent need to remind each other, okay, but my child is unique. Now, I need to find out the uniqueness of my child's autism. So that is where the seed of the injustice begins. And then from there, as the child grows, the focus is so much on treating autism.
It's something that can be treated but can't be cured.
It's not disease at all.
Yeah.
It is just a kind of person somebody is. Like, I'm dark-skinned. Now, I might harbor the desire to be extremely fair-skinned. So, I take measures. Now, would you call that a treatment of a disorder? No. Isn't it? It's like something that I hope to be, which is not my natural self. And so I have to resort to a whole lot of very artificial measures and still not acquire the pigmentation of a naturally less pigmented skin. Right? So autism is just not something that needs to be addressed through any kind of curative measures. Mm-hmm. What it really, really needs is for each autistic individual to be understood for who that person is.
The acceptance is what people need to...
I also feel something like just acknowledgement. Because again, the accept puts us on a slightly higher pedestal. Like, I'm accepting you as being...
But when I say acceptance, I don't want to,
I know what you mean.
Don't want to make the word really pompous and make it sound like, okay, I'm accepting you. But it's more like saying, be aware and acknowledge the presence of the person just as normally as anybody else.
Acknowledgement and respect. And it is just that we are all different from each other.
Yeah. And also from the white society that you claim of, right?
A member of.
So the thing is, there's always this thought, okay, if I am playing football, I will know how the game runs. So if you're educating a child, you know how the kid works out to be. So from, let's say, from a layman's point of view, if I'm looking at a special kid, my first thought is, how do I approach the kid? And once I approach, and it is an immense amount of patience that the special educators or even parents or special, again, I don't use a special word, special kids term, but
with, let's say,
kids
diverse
with autism.
Needs or something. Yes, autism. Yes.
It's another level of patience and, the strength that they carry, that with all the stimming and all these things that happen, for them to even hold on to this and still be working on, not looking at an end product, but still be a part of that journey.
Huge respect, Bob.
So
huge respect.
We as laymen, when we don't have a recent experience with someone with autism, how does one approach this and not look like a douche with the way we react to them?
One of the best things to do is to, if it's a small child, is to ask the parent that I would like to do the right thing by this child, because that is what the child deserves. It's the right of every child to belong in a manner that is comfortable to that child. So if I have encountered a child, let's say on the lift, in my premise, wherever, and I feel that I don't know, I would like to go and maybe meet the child or talk to the child, then probably one of the ways could be to approach the parent respectfully and say that I would really like to be friends with the child, but I don't want to do the wrong thing because I don't really understand. So if there's a way you could help me out, that's one way. The other is for many people to acknowledge the presence of diversity by staring at diversity. Now, that is something I think members of the wider society can address between each other. Like, I have kind of made it a personal goal for myself that if I see this happening, I just go up and say, I see that you are kind of very curious. I know a little bit about it. I think the child is on spectrum. So it's more or less probably the child is feeling overwhelmed by the environment or something. And that is the child's behavioral response. There's nothing abnormal. And a child with a difference is a normal child. The words normal and abnormal have again managed to attach to themselves
divide
connotations that are really, really crazy. But, well, we kind of stuck with some words for a while. I think the less, the Oxford Dictionary, people say that the less you use a word, it kind of just becomes extinct after a while. So our effort is to just not keep
use
using
normal.
it.
I mean,
not keep
normalize
using
not using normal.
Right. Or use it in a wider sense. Like, I tell the parents of children who come to me, or even others, that each child in his or her own world is completely normal. I'll tell you something very interesting. So I was working with this child many, many years back who was on a wheelchair, because of some affliction and all that. And one day, the parents were very inhibited about taking him out. Anyway, cut a long story short, we managed to take him out one day. We went out to a local park and watched playing. And he was giggling, laughing. So everybody, the mother said, oh, he's so happy to come out and all that. So he was a very vocal child. We used to chat and tell stories to each other. So I said, what is making you laugh? Like, I'm seeing you laugh and I feel like laughing myself. So he turned around to me and said, Champa aunty, they're all running on their feet. Oh. So I said, yeah, it's very funny, isn't it? So we both laughed together. Now, this child finds it very funny that people actually get up and run on their feet. Because for him, it's normal to just sit somewhere. And if they have to get up, you have to ask for help and be kind of dragged or picked up. So it was really funny for him to see this whole crowd out there run. It was funny. Can you believe that?
It
was abnormal.
Surprises me. Like, I'm overwhelmed with the thought how the parents have just taken care of that kid and made that entire thing seem normal for him.
Yes.
Like, I've heard stories that are dark and,
yes.
Like parents is letting go of a child because they believe in disorders.
Yes.
But this is so heartwarming.
So that
I'm actually having goosebumps listening to that.
I can never forget the moment. I said, yeah, so he said, they're so funny. So he did not even know the word abnormal. So he kept saying funny, funny, funny. I said, yeah, it's strange, And then that was a great moment for me to empower him. And I said, many people will find you funny and weird and strange. So he said, why? He said, because you're on a wheelchair and they are not. So whenever we are not something, we might find the other kind like strange. And sometimes the world has other words. So I made use of that opportunity. So he was like, oh, okay. It was like an aha moment for him. So no, that's not very nice. I said, yeah, it's not really very nice.
Let's look at cultures for just a beginning. One culture is stranger than the other. One's normal for us.
Exactly.
So I think that's just, it's normal for us to start believing that everybody is just equal. And it's just about how their behavior patterns change.
We are very driven by a very extremely strongly etched cultural conditioning. Social, cultural, the financial, economic strata that each of us belong from, our language tradition. So we are hugely conditioned. And I think the main war here is against that conditioning. It's very, very natural to feel uncomfortable in the presence of someone who comes across as very different.
Right.
Whether it's the color of the skin, the way they wear their clothes, the way they talk, what they eat, the way they behave. It's absolutely natural to feel. But to allow that discomfort to turn into prejudice, to turn into bias, that convinces you that this person who's so different from you is not worth it, is less than you, cannot understand things, does not have intelligence, is never going to be able to do anything, blah, 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 all of that. That is unacceptable. And that is, I think, where anybody who has a sense of oneness with diversity needs to step in very proactively. And one of the very important things, Bob, I really, really feel is to have lived experiences, the voices of lived experiences be broadcast. So now you have, even in Bangalore itself, there are a few young, extremely talented, very, very expressive people who are writing books, writing poetry, blogging, and they are autistic people, autistic young authors. And it is so enriching to know straight from them what some people like me might have had in our minds in our work with children. We felt that, to control a child's behavior, to make a child sit down and do things for a reward, to try and modify is not the right thing to do. It's like imprisoning
Right.
a person's natural way of communication, and that is the worst thing that we can be doing. Now, to be endorsed in those instincts by people who have lived through it and now who are finding their voice and are able to express in their writings that yes, that is not the way. And now we have a much, much better understanding, like I said, of what behavior is.
Right.
Don't look at the manifested outward overt expression of the body and the face and the voice. Look at what lies behind it. What is my child trying to tell me by like jumping up and down? Probably my child is just trying to tell me that I want to jump up and down. I need to jump up and down.
Right.
So it is a need as against what has been seen and is still being seen by many as unruly behavior.
Right.
There is again this thin line. So there is a difficulty with regulation. To understand it a little better, all of us have this neural ability that is a kind of a filtration system and a kind of a regulation system. So what happens when in the so-called typical progression is our brain learns to filter out inputs, all sensory inputs
Right.
that are not very significant at that time. But some neural systems are not able to do that.
Right.
It's nothing deliberate. They're just not able to filter out. So there is an inner urge. You might have heard of the term ADHD. Very common. Everybody now is ADHD. Okay, all kids. If you were to go by school,
The Gen
teachers,
Zs are ADHD.
Yeah, all school teachers, like every kid just has to shift his bum a little bit, it becomes ADHD. But it's not really like that. It is a concerning way a person is made, because it poses a lot of very significant difficulties for that person. That person is out of control. How would you or I feel if at any particular given moment we want to do something, but we're just not able to do it?
Just frozen in time.
Yeah. So that is how it happens to them. So those are not behaviors to be controlled or modified or to be disciplined. I hate that word, by the way. They are to be understood as needs. So there are bodily needs, there are cognitive, mental needs, there are emotional, psychological needs, which may be a little quick,
Right.
quick changes. So those needs need to be addressed. And the more and more the needs are addressed, the more and more that little child, that older person, finds the confidence of being who he or she is, and also now has the respite to come up with ways of self-management.
Right.
Right? So we have to understand each person for who they are. Now, the corporate world is now going in a large wave in this diversity intake or whatever. And I get to hear a lot of job opportunities that are coming up. I also get a lot of people coming to me for counseling because they are eminently qualified people. They may be on the spectrum. They may have other diverse conditions, but they are not understood in their place of work.
It's this is something, ma'am, like we know people from every background can go on to achieve a lot, from even getting employed in a corporate to even doing some of the biggest things in the world possibly. But when someone comes from a certain, for lack of a better term, I would say, say for example, someone comes from the spectrum. The person's lived a certain life for all his or her life, but then they move from that entire protected environment to another environment where it's like, you could call it the wild. And they are not patronized to this society, and the society is not patronized to their world as well. So it is going to be a little clash, and it's bound to happen because both are alien to each other.
Absolutely. And this whole inclusion fiasco is a fiasco because it is one-sided.
I believe it. I completely believe it.
It's
It's a gimmick, I believe.
It is. Largely. I'm not saying it is intended to be so. There are
Not in most cases.
Yeah, millions who are like all very clear, very honest intentions. But how is it being implemented? So if you look at the word inclusion, then you presuppose the word exclusion. Because there was exclusion sometime somewhere, we need inclusion, right? So who excluded whom? Let's say the more able or the ones who were better, whatever, excluded the lesser or the less able, whatever. Fine, that happened. Then the world woke up to the whole rights thing and the whole thing about everybody has a right to belong and all of that. Fine, again, a very good move. And then the world woke up to like, let's include everyone. Now, who includes whom? We are back to the policies or the principles or the measures, the steps that are labeled under inclusion. Who is planning them? Who is designing them? It is again that first group that actually first excluded. They may not be the same people, but it's again the same group.
The label, let's say the white society,
Yes,
like you said.
Yes.
But
so
there's
how
one
can
thing
it
with
be
what
just?
you said.
How can it be just? It cannot be unless you ask the other side, like, do you even want to be included? I mean, what do you want to be? What do you think? I mean, or do you want to include me in your world? I've had children with autism or some others tell me that stand far away. Now, as a teacher, I might feel very affronted. Like, I love you, my darling, and I'm coming close to tell you. But no, if I am a true teacher to them, then I understand that this is my child who feels claustrophobic with my physical presence so near. So he's just trying to help me out so that he can include me in his world. So if I want to be included, I have to respect those things. I have to find out from each has to find out from the other side. But then again, how many of us are really asking the others?
When you say inclusion, there's also going to be another tribe that comes into place, is the LGBTQ
Yes,
place.
yes.
I mean, sorry, LGBTQIA plus and whatever that comes
yes.
by. I always believe, ma'am, that this whole inclusion is a gimmick to a certain extent, also because of corporate scores that come in, but also in its true sense. Who is including or who's being exclusive to themselves?
Exactly.
Like, for example, the LGBTQ want to make things normal, but they want to label themselves under a certain pronoun and stuff. So that way what happens is you are dissuading yourself from the entire world, and you're making a separate label for yourself, a separate group for yourself. Now, the same way, like, it is the way it is because certain labels or certain groups are recognized just in terms of description. For example, if I have to call somebody, it's difficult for me to say, to explain who this person is. But maybe if I could, give a little description about that person, maybe on those per se, there is grouping and these so-called labels are come through. So when it comes to inclusion, I believe like people with autism, they're normal in their world.
Of course.
And the reason they say, with all empathy in my heart, and I believe a lot of people would also believe the same way, that autism has a special place in a lot of people's heart because they know they don't have that kind of a life. So, I mean, for
Yes,
people like the
of
white
course,
society,
there are limitations,
they will
yes.
probably say, okay, we're blessed to be like this. For them, instead of always being dependent on somebody, we can do things on our own. So to see that person, there's always empathy. But that empathy doesn't really translate into the right behavior at times.
Yes.
Like you also mentioned, where you see some autistic people sitting in one place, a lot of people will shoo themselves away from where they are sitting.
Oh yes, oh yes.
What do you think is the reason? Do you think these people are treated as like untouchables or something?
It's the fear of the unknown.
Okay.
You go back in history, you read in history books and all, a time when people worship thunder,
Right.
things like that. So now we have a whole huge physics, chemistry theory on what thunder is, and we all know it and all. So it is the fear of the unknown. So the moment we see somebody with manifested behaviors that are very uncommon or strange for us, and like I said, the social conditioning is huge. So we immediately jump to the conclusion that, oh my God, this person is going to go up in flames just now, like start screaming, shouting, what are we going to do? Let's move away from here. Something very unpleasant is going to happen, etc., etc., etc. Right. Now, I'll tell you how this conditioning works. Somebody, like you said, many of us actually have a very deep sense of empathy, or if not empathy, at least there's no
A humane side to it.
negative. Yes, exactly. That's a nice word, humane. So recently, I was in a particular place to do some workshop for parents where a kind of a tragedy had occurred with a young child who lost his life. And one of the people there said that the moment they heard that this has happened, the first thought that came to their mind was that it's probably one of the disabled kids.
Okay.
Okay, so that is the power of covert social conditioning, that anything untoward happens, and we know that there are people with disability in that area, you're jumping,
To conclusions.
yes, that it has to be one of them. Why? Are we unaware that the wider society members have huge emotional issues? There are no jobs, there is psychological problems, there is anxiety, there's depression, people are on medication, there is heart disease, there's everything in the white society. So if something untoward has happened, why do I immediately think it's one of those kids?
But jumping to conclusions is a habit.
Yes, that is the deeply etched prejudice. So, and you mentioned a while back about parents, and I said huge respect, hats off. It's very difficult. First is, for a parent, the coming to terms that, okay, I have to now nurture a child who is going to be different, and I have no clue myself. A new parent really doesn't have a clue. It's a voyage in discovery, right? And that is also fraught with like 1,000 pitfalls, because there will be numerous people saying different things, and you will be running from pillar to post to do the best thing. Your initial years will all be spent in curing your child, and then many of you will reach that level that, okay, I don't need to cure my child. I need to understand my child better and facilitate my child's growth and development. And in the process, you would have alienated your friends and family. There are a lot of unsaid, unspoken griefs to deal with. And the most common of them all, very unfortunately, is the finger pointing that you are somehow to be blamed for who your child is. Mostly the mothers. You must have eaten something, you must have drank something, you must have done something bad.
Or you also must have, it's a bad karma.
Yes, yes. So apart from the very tangible thing of dealing with a child whose needs are so obviously different, you're not very conversant, you're not really getting the correct inputs also. So it's like a struggle. You also have to deal with so many of these unspoken, unsaid, and sometimes even very vocalized, accusations. And it's easy for us to say that, let it be water of a duck's bag, don't give ear to it. We're human. If I have 10 people in some ways turning around and telling me, look, if you hadn't done that, your kid would not, this would not have happened. Somewhere it's going to make an impact. I'm a mother or a father. So there are those griefs to deal with. There are those very complex psycho-emotional conditions of a parent to deal with. Then you have financial aspects. Anything out of the ordinary
is an extraordinary expense.
Yes. And all of us are not blessed with like earning, 5 lakhs a month or something like that. It costs money. Where is all this going to come from? Then we are also plagued with, okay, probably my kid is never going to really earn something for herself. So I need to do that.
Prepare for the future as well.
Yes, and then what after me? Today my kid stims and flaps and does this or that, but I know my child. I know my child is highly intelligent. I know my child gets everything, can write poetry, can do things. But how can I be sure that after I'm not there, he will get the same love and understanding and support for his everyday functioning that I provide? Who's going to be there for him? So these are million questions that plague the parents.
I forget playing parents, ma'am. This is a question. There is this. I don't want to say kid now, but then there was this autistic person in my lane itself. And every time I look at the way the mother takes care of him, I would have tears in my eyes. And every time I pass by him now or pass by them, I always have this thought, we all are not forever on this planet.
Exactly.
And the worst thing for a parent to see is a kid die before them.
Oh, yes.
But this is a case where the parent is dying every day thinking, what about the kid after them?
Exactly, the what after me question.
And this is a thought I've been having, and I'm just thinking you're equal to gods if I have to just put it right and say, for you all to take care of kids like this and have all that heart to put it in.
The parent is living it every
single
moment, every day.
Because who would decide to say, it's okay, I'll struggle every day? Because it is a struggle every day.
Right. And then on top of that, for the wide world out there, the wide society, as I keep saying, which includes schools or teachers and, the works, telling parents that, no, this is not right for your child. Oh, no, don't try this. Just put your kid in a special. No, just do this therapy and that's all. Your kid is not capable of doing everything else. And this is going to be... So it's like a bombardment that comes from all angles. It's like you're just being stoned all the time. Right. And then yours is a high energy kid who has his own system or her own system to deal with that is not allowing him or her to just quieten down and follow a nice routine and a pattern. See, what happens is children go to school or they go somewhere, the parents get a respite or they go off to their own work and all. But here is a child who needs that care and, that attention, definitely more than, let's say, the other kid. And so here is this mother who is on her feet 24 hours. How long can you pursue that? And then, like I said, there are many people with autism who have medical issues. And those need to be separated from the autism per se because they need medical treatment.
Right.
But it's difficult. So there are gut issues sometimes. Sleep orientation is different sometimes. Because of this mind-body disconnect, so to speak, there are many, many children on autism who find it extremely difficult to put food in their mouth and chew.
Right.
So feeding them, they need their nutrition, right? So these are everyday struggles. Things like going to the washroom to relieve themselves. It's not that the children do not understand what needs to be done, but for them, implementation is a massive challenge. And so it's a work in progress for sometimes many, many years.
While we talk about these challenges, there's also another notion that people with autism don't have a longer life. Is that true?
Not at all. As of now, there is no convincing scientific base to say that they have a shorter lifespan. It's not like that. Especially when it comes to the ASD. But we have other conditions like, let's say, Downs and all, where certain conditions, physical conditions are associated, where a lifespan may be impacted. But it's, again, not a blanket theory. It's not like everybody with Downs is going to go before time or something like that. No. But the health implications are very significant because if you have gut issues for a lifetime, like forever, if you have sleep pattern difficulties for like every day for a long time, it is definitely going to impact the other physiological aspects.
That was the reason.
Yes.
Because you said some people are hard of eating and some people are even hard of getting sleep as well.
Yes.
So these are going to be affecting in the long run.
They do, but there's not very hardcore research that has that shows numbers by statistics that they definitely have a shorter lifespan. It's each to his own kind of thing.
Have you heard about stories of parents letting go of kids with autism?
Yes.
And any drastic ones that you've heard of?
Yes, of course. See, what happens is sometimes it's difficult for us to really come to terms with it, but it becomes really, really impossible for a parent who's, let's say, in their 70s, okay, and they have their son or daughter who's, let's say, in his or her 40s or something, and still continues to have a lot of the overt challenges. For instance, there are these behavior responses to sensory stimuli, which the world calls meltdowns. So there could be a lot of screaming and shouting. There could be a lot of physical, so-called aggression, pushing, pulling, hitting. Now that becomes completely unmanageable for an older parent too. So there are many, and this is a kind of pervasive concern in the parent community, whereby we now have some assisted living communities coming up,
Right.
and also many of them are being spearheaded by parents themselves, which is always how movements happen, which is a good sign in a way. And I think my little bit to this is we need to create our own communities in our own little ways instead of waiting for some big thing to happen and then becoming a member of that society, because we are just too many in the context of India.
And also, it's a simple thing, ma'am. Unless you are part and experiencing something, you wouldn't know the difficulties of it or the challenges of it.
Exactly.
And that's when you create something to better the particular situation.
A nice, this is also some years back. We were in Rajasthan. My husband was in the army and we were posted there. And there was this family, extended family, who had some members who were who needed support and help. And there were still children. When all the family members decided to buy plots right next to each other and create a kind of a little housing society kind of thing. And they did that in anticipation that at some point of time, probably it's going to become difficult for those family members with children who needed support to live life on their own. Mm-hmm. So in anticipation, they bought these land, they made the housing community. So they now all have individual houses and all, but it's within a kind of a gated community. And what has happened is, members have come and gone. Some people have gone abroad, and how it is like young people. But there's always somebody there, and these children have grown up as a member of that wider community. So this what after me question, I find for that particular housing society is not as vicious as it is for many, many parents who are battling it out alone. So I just feel that when I hear so many parents talking of, like, what are we going to do? Where is my kid going to live when he grows up and all? Probably one thing to explore is within your friend community. Buy something close by, let everybody grow up together, and one way or the other, maybe we find somebody after me to be still there.
There's a hope of it to happen.
There is. And like I said, that the more formal ones are these committees that are coming up, these societies and all. But maybe all of us cannot access them because, again, there is a money factor. Most of these are expensive. Because, of course, it's a very planned thing and it's huge. So not all of us can access it. So what about those children who are being brought up in very middle-class families, lower middle class? It's not that they cannot think. The principle remains the same. It's just that you create your own little housing society with your own people, friends and family, and somehow simulate something like that. One has to keep trying.
You speak with so much passion on this subject. I'm very curious to understand, when did you start getting into this whole education system?
Yeah, it's interesting for me also. So I graduated as a teacher in 1987 from Delhi University. My BA undergrad was in English literature, and then I did my teacher's training from Delhi University. And my first job was in a school called St. Thomas Girls in Delhi. 1987. Interestingly, that was a year when UNICEF, in collaboration with the Delhi government or whatever it is, had undertaken this pilot project called the PIDE project, which was going to study what are the ways that we could have children with difficulties be mainstreamed. Like those days, the word was mainstreaming, not inclusion. So mainstreaming children. And I was one of the teachers appointed in that project. So I was like all of just very young, fresh out of college. I had absolutely no idea about these conditions. And one fine day, I had children in my classroom who were visibly very different. And thank God there was no Google.
Okay.
So I had to go. I felt that it was my duty as a teacher to provide the best, and I just didn't know how to do it. So I took appointments from neurologists, psychiatrists, psychologists, pediatricians, the works. I would take appointments, go to them with like my diary and write copious notes, ask them, define things to them. And I started learning the words, the vocabulary, the evaluations like mental retardation, Down syndrome, autism, and intellectual disability and all that came later. So all of these things, spasticity and all of these things. So I really went into this whole study, and what my takeaway was that every child has a right to belong. And we must not make the rules for that belonging. The rule has to come from the child. So I approached my headmistress after a few months and I said, this particular child with spasticity who finds it very difficult to even hold a pencil. And it's absolutely not fair for you to tell me that Champa, she needs to do her lesson and write all the 10 answers that the other kids are doing. I said, that's not fair. But what we can do is, while the other children are writing 5 answers, I could collaborate with this particular child and we could write 1 answer. Because that's what she can manage. She's slow, she writes. So I was in a very supportive school. My principal, the late Mrs. Joy Michael, I revere her as an educational head. She said, go ahead and do it. And now I'm getting the goosebumps. Because the joy that day of that little girl, after she filled some 5 pages with 1 sentence, is etched in my memory. The joy that I did it. I said, yes, you've written 1 answer. It's so fantastic. And soon after that, I got married and my husband was posted in a field area. I would get letters from this child, which would be only 1 sentence in those inland letters of the blue. It would say, I love you.
So heartwarming.
Yes, but she wrote. She had become independent. She was writing. Having been told she was almost 12 at that time, this child was told by everybody that, hey, what are you thinking writing and all? She's so abnormal. She's like a disabled kid.
Yeah.
Handicapped was the word that was very common in those days. But so I came away with this very enriching takeaway from that experience. And then I would look for opportunities where I could interact with children and families who had differences. Then I got married into the army. So the army always has a social welfare aspect to it. I'm grateful for that. That gave me a lot of opportunities. So there's this organization within the army called ASHA that helps the families, the personnel with children. So I would volunteer for ASHA. And then in 94, my younger son was born. And it was a very traumatic birth. He had brain damage at birth. And so my subject came home.
Okay.
So I was now like, literally from being just a teacher and a professional to a mother professional. So, and then Ankush, who's my younger son, became my biggest teacher. So he's an individual with intellectual disability. He's almost 30 years old. He's married. He's an international sportsman. He plays golf for Special Olympics India. He's a gold medalist golfer in Special Olympics. And my daughter-in-law, again, an extremely sweet person, began life with a lot of challenges, has overcome a lot. She's a Hindustani vocalist. She's also a qualified teacher. And the 2 of them make for the greatest dynamic young couple that anyone can
When
come
someone
across.
said the teachers of our generation are the rarest and you'll never find the likes of them, when I look at you, it's like goosebumps. It's like every single emotion is coming out and make me feel so proud that, we had some of the best teachers during our time.
Right.
And like what you've done, you said your son's your biggest teacher.
Yes.
Your life itself and what you've done beautifully with your family. Like, it turns people emotionally so good.
Yes.
That there's so much of positivity to take from this. Now, on that note, I want to ask you, ma'am, we'll never have an ideal world, but then when we talk about autism, what can one individual do better to better the world in its own sense?
I think each one of us should just talk to ourselves to say that there are going to be many different kinds of people around me when I step out of my house. I have to understand that differences make this world. And if somebody is very different, it means nothing more than that. It just means that I and he or she are different in some ways. But the most important thing is we both belong to the same race. If I feel hungry, so do they. If I feel thirsty, so do they. If I feel love, hate, jealousy, irritation, anger, tiredness, so do they. And if I need all that I need in those times, so do they. So there is this massive rope, of commonality that actually binds us, but we prefer to focus on those tiny threads and strings of differences. So let's, it's like a cobweb which we need to just wipe off and focus on that rope of commonality. We belong to the same race. We feel the same things. We think and we want the same things. So in different ways. So it's just that.
I've learned something over time about how perceptions and perspectives, perceptions are opinions, but perspectives are you look at others' opinions as well.
Yes.
And that's where you start feeling things for others as well and be a little more empathetic and realistic in approach.
Absolutely.
And I think that brings about the right balance. Of course, we'll never have the ideal world that we always dream of, but there's always a start to build something better. And ma'am, thank you so much for coming by. For many of those goosebump moments and for some amazing stories. And I would say it's very inspiring to see what you do because I would definitely take a leaf off of you and try and implement somewhere in my life, whether it's with someone with autism or in any other spectrum of life by itself. So thank you so much for coming by. It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's an honor to just have you sit here and talk about such great stories and inspiring ones, in fact.
Thank you so much for having me over. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Pleasure's mine.
Thank you so much.
You.